Thank you, Senator. And Senator Capito was graciously yielded to Senator Lummis for the next round of questions. Senator Lummis, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member. I appreciate it. Administrator Regan, welcome. I would comment first, before I ask a question about PFAS, that it's simply impossible for EPA to absorb and responsibly spend the amount of money that is being requested. And I look forward to visiting with you about if this amount of money is thrown at EPA, how you think you could possibly spend it responsibly. Anyway, that's just an editorial comment. Administrator Regan, I've heard from public wastewater utilities concerned that a CERCLA listing for PFAS could leave them liable to bear the costs of contamination, putting the onus on local communities and households. Public water and wastewater utilities did not produce or benefit from PFAS, but since it flowed through their systems, they could be left bearing the cost associated with cleanup, which will mean higher rates in people's water bills. If a designation moves forward, does EPA plan to hold public wastewater utilities and local communities liable for PFAS contamination under CERCLA?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. and our goal is to use all of our enforcement authority to hold the companies responsible accountable. That's goal number one. Number two, we do not want the burden and the onus to fall on our wastewater treatment facilities, especially those smaller ones in our rural communities. And so that's why there is $8 billion in the bipartisan infrastructure law, thanks to many of you all that got that in that law, that will provide some financial reassurance to these smaller communities as we begin to pursue this regulation.
Does EPA have authority to provide exemptions? Because exercising enforcement discretion doesn't seem sufficient.
Well, we do have enforcement discretion. I think that we have to look at the tools that we have within our toolbox, and enforcement discretion is one, but it's a very powerful tool that we can use.
Do you have statutory authority to provide exemptions?
We don't.
Okay.
We have the enforcement discretion tool.
Can EPA use its regulatory authority to strengthen existing federal exclusions under CERCLA, including the federally permitted release and normal application of fertilizer, by clarifying that these apply to public wastewater utilities adhering to their Clean Water Act permits?
I will have to take a look into that.
Perfect.
Request.
Thank you for that answer. And I'm going to submit some other questions for you for the record. But with my remaining time, I'd like to switch to the Good Neighbor Rule and ozone transport. In your most recent ozone transport rule, the EPA released updated modeling showing Wyoming's contribution to downwind states at 0.68, which is below the 0.7 parts per billion national standard for ozone threshold. The EPA should have approved Wyoming's state implementation plan rather than deferring. Any other action is arbitrary and not in accordance with the law. So do you have a time frame of when the agency is going to act on Wyoming's plan?
Well, I'd like to say I've enjoyed my conversations with Governor Gordon. I think our teams are working extremely well together. I think it's because of that productive relationship that we deferred action on Wyoming. I don't have a particular timeline with me now. We can follow up with that. But I think it is instructive that the conversation that we had with Wyoming was one of the reasons that the Good Neighbor Rule was as targeted as it is, using the best available information, having these constructive conversations, not only with governors, but state regulators, I believe produce the best results for the country.
Well, thank you. I do believe that the EPA should have approved Wyoming State Implementation Plan rather than deferring, because we fall below EPA's own updated modeling in a way that makes us compliant. And so the fact that this hasn't been approved is a source of frustration. I have some questions, Mr. Chairman, about small finery exemptions, RFS, and coal combustion residual, and some other things I'll submit for the record, and look forward to continuing some of these conversations with you. Thanks so much, Administrator Regan. I yield back.
Thank you.
Senator Lummis, thank you.